Hello and welcome to the National Debate. I'm Madhav Das Gopalakrishnan. Viewers, President Donald Trump has revived the global tariff war, and this time, India is on his hit list. It appears decisions of a sovereign nation like India on the purchase of oil and energy has irked the US president, and this has prompted him to slap a 50% tariff on India. But the picture is quite clear. India is in no mood to entertain such bullying tactics. The government is preparing for thorough discussions with the US delegation that's expected to land in India later this month. And before that, the Prime Minister has also made it clear that India is not going to bow down and farmers' welfare will remain the government's priority. But on the other hand, India is also widening its options as it continues to mend its ties with nations like China and even deepen relations with Russia. So how can India respond to Trump's latest tariff tantrum, and is retaliatory tariff the only way forward from here? Let me quickly, in fact, take this across and look at what really are the first set of talking points that we're looking at this point of time. So what is Donald Trump saying in effect that has caused the entire controversy? The first claim is that India buys majority of its military equipment from Russia. There's a second claim that India is Russia's largest buyer of energy along with China. There's a third claim that India is not only buying massive amounts of Russian oil, but also that India is selling Russian oil in the open market for big profits. This is what US claims. It also goes on to say that they don't care about how many Ukrainians are killed by Russia. This itself is being stated by the US president as far as the reasons for these tariffs. Let's also quickly take a look at why India is being singled out. And why are we saying that? Just look at the energy purchases that are happening as far as China, as far as EU are concerned. When it comes to oil imports, China is at 1,90,996, EU at 1,04,726, and India is at 1,30,046. This is, of course, when it comes to oil imports. Gas imports, China is at 35,538, EU far more at 1,04,146. India, in terms of gas imports from Russia, is at nil. And this is the entire hypocrisy, ladies and gentlemen, because even the United States does a certain amount of business when it comes to nuclear materials, including uranium that it sources from Russia. Why then is there this hypocrisy when it comes to India?
India says that the U.S. imports Russian uranium, chemicals, fertilizers, while criticizing their energy imports. Your response to that, sir?
I don't know anything about it. I'd have to check, but we'll get back to you on that. Yep.
All right, let me introduce our panelists. Now joining us here in the studio is Veena Sikri, former diplomat. We have with us Major General Dhruv Katoj, who's retired director of the Indian Foundation. We also have P.K. Basu, lead an independent economist, joining us at the moment. With us from outside the studio is Matt Klink. He's a Republican strategist. Also with us is Anand Ahuja, attorney at law and co-founder of Indian Americans for Trump. Ina Tangent is senior fellow at the Tahe Institute and chairman of Asia Narratives. With us also is Fred Weir, who's a Russian expert and journalist, joining us. But my first question goes across to Lisa Curtis, director of the Indo-Pacific Security Program at the Center for New American Security and former deputy assistant to the president and senior director for South and Central Asia National Security Council in the White House. Lisa Curtis, what really is happening at this point of time has raised many questions. Questions, A, of why India is unfairly being singled out. China not only buys oil from Russia, but buys oil from Iran. It has got a much lower tariff, although it may be only an interim deal that is there till the 12th of August. But nevertheless, none of the other countries appear to have been taxed or tariffed the way in which India has. And even look at the hypocrisy when both EU is buying energy from Russia, as well as you look at the fact that the United States is buying uranium and several other materials from Russia, and all of that continues parallelly. Lisa Curtis.
Well, I think what's really happening here is President Trump is frustrated with President Putin and his lack of willingness to engage in discussions about a ceasefire in Ukraine. So I think that is primarily what's happening. India is getting caught in this situation. And I think, it's unfortunate that we have seen the criticism of India coming fast and furious from President Trump over the last few weeks. The additional 25% in tariffs over India's imports of Russian oil come on top of the 25% tariffs that came into effect on August 1st. So we really see a lot of pressure on India over these trade negotiations and its imports of Russian oil. And I find this unfortunate because during the first Trump administration in which I served, President Trump really focused on elevating the U.S.-India partnership. And I think when he left office in January 2021, the relationship was at an all-time high. And unfortunately, I think President Trump is risking the overall strategic partnership with India in his, wanting to get this trade deal. And I know these are Trump's tactics. He plays hardball tactics. He's done it with many other countries. But I think it would be better if the Trump administration was sensitive to, India's strategic concerns and also, try to keep most of the criticism in private. I think that would be a much more effective way to negotiate with India.
Absolutely. And let me take that question right across to Matt Klink. Matt Klink is a Republican strategist, but Matt Klink, look at what Lisa Curtis is saying. I think it makes a lot of sense that this is not how negotiations are done. You don't play hardball publicly, and you don't end up using phrases, as we've been debating for some time now, which actually insult, a country that you've tried very hard to build your relations for the last 2.5 decades. That's certainly not the best way forward. And this kind of slapping of 50% tariff, which is, totally unexpected and totally unbecoming of two countries which were growing closer together. You're only risking pushing India closer to China and Russia, which is something we've seen happen over the past week.
I have a feeling you're not going to like what I'm going to have to say, but look, Donald Trump doesn't do sensitive. Donald Trump is not a traditional American president. He is not going to glad hand in public and backslap in public and then be tough behind the scenes. With Donald Trump, what you see is what you get. And I think that where Lisa was correct, Donald Trump is clearly frustrated at the pace of resolving the Ukrainian-Russian war. He does see that India is and has made a lot of money on buying cheap Russian oil, refining it, and selling profits on the world stage. And he is, look, you make it sound like it's a new 50% tariff. To be clear, it's a 25% tariff on top of the existing 25% tariff. And look, India has a choice. You can push back. You could fight Donald Trump. You can get now. I mean, look, we have a saying in American politics that, if you want to fight in the mud, the only thing that's going to happen is that both sides are going to get dirty. I don't think that Donald Trump minds getting dirty if it helps him get his end goal in the long run. And you also have to remember, Donald Trump doesn't look at anything, this completely severs the relationship. It's broken. It's a moment in time. So it's India's term in the washing machine. You're going to get spun around for a while. They're sending people over, so negotiate a better deal.
Okay, is it really
that's
that
what
simple?
Donald Trump wants?
All right.
Yeah, it is.
Veena Sikri,
it is.
Okay, let's go one by one. We have several of our panelists in our studio as well. Veena Sikri, is it really that simple? Because, we've seen tariffs and trade negotiations tied in with geopolitics like perhaps never before. And, while it may be fine from Donald Trump, who's, used to, making deals as a businessman, the way that it plays out geopolitically, strategically, diplomatically is a completely different ballgame.
Well, I think that there's one important point I'd like to point out. Of course, President Trump has chosen to weaponize trade and weaponize tariffs. That's his choice. But the point that neither of the panelists before me have answered, why the double standards? I think this is the point that is hitting India the most, because India is being singled out for its purchase of energy from Russia and talking of profit. But what about what the EU is doing? You showed figures today showing the EU has more than double the purchases from Russia of energy and energy, gas and oil. But nothing has been said to them about it. USA itself buys huge amounts, about $6 billion a year of fertilizers and palladium and uranium, but nothing has been said about that. In fact, President Trump denied all knowledge of this when he spoke. So I think for India, this question of double standards is very important. Even during Operation Sindoor, we called out double standards on terror. And now we are calling out double standards on tariffs. And I think that we would like an answer on this question, because singling India out in this manner is not helping the Indo-US relationship at all. And our Prime Minister has said very clearly that for us in India, the second aspect is the Indian economy, the Indian farmers, the Indian fishermen, the Indian dairy, the ones who look after the dairy aspect of our trade. And their concerns are very important. So on our trade talks, we have specified clearly our red lines. And we have given in to America on a lot of issues. On purchase of American oil products, we've increased it substantially. On purchases of soybean oil from America, we've prepared to increase this substantially. On purchase of BT cotton. So the trade deal, the talks are going on, but to suspend those talks, as is the latest information of today, based on this question of the purchase of Indian energy from Russia.
And we don't know that for sure, because Trump said something, but Trump's statements, how reliable they are, we don't know. We've seen several of them not being so reliable, despite the fact that it may have even come from the White House or other locations. But let me take that question across to one of our other panelists. Anand Ahuja, when this question of U.S. imports coming in of Russian uranium, chemicals, fertilizers to the U.S., Donald Trump says, I don't know anything about it, I have to check. I certainly hope that you are not going to give us the same reply. What explains this kind of double standards when it comes to U.S. importing from Russia, but India can't, apparently?
Madhav, before I respond to this question, if I'm permitted to respond to the various panelists have raised this question that India has been singled out. In my opinion, if you see Indo-US relationship for the last 70 years, as compared to USA relationship with Canada, USA relationship with NATO countries, USA relationship with the European Union and other countries in the world, if you compare that, India has not been singled out. There are other countries also. Let's say, for example, Canada, 35% tariff is on Canada. Canada is our next door neighbor. We share border with Canada. If you see Japan, Japan is United States ally. If you see European Union, there is a tariff on European Union countries also. So it's wrong to say, and I don't feel comfortable, because we are damaging USA-India relationship.
How many of these countries you mentioned? Mr. Ahuja, no, I have to interrupt you here, sir, because how many of these countries are being charged 50%? There's only India in all of Asia, and there's Brazil in South America. It looks like an attempt at putting pressure on the BRICS formation.
No. So you said very rightly. The question is, India is member of BRICS, and in that is supporting China. India is member of CARD and is against China. So where India stands, you have to be very clear about India's foreign policy. India is with Iran and India is with Israel also. India is with Ukraine and India is with Russia also.
Yeah, but India does not buy Iran under pressure from the United States oil. And India, therefore, China, which buys oil, is being offered a trade deal. So the point is, US also has to decide, is US with, by the same yardstick, is US with Pakistan or with India? You're whining and dining, the army chief there, Air Marshal, Field Marshal Munir. That's something that's not going to be acceptable to India as well.
Madhav, let's not go into that area. If you blame Donald Trump, please.
What's good for the goose is good for the gander, sir.
Let me respond, please. If Donald Trump is to be blamed for inviting General Munir for lunch, then you should blame Prime Minister Modi also to go as uninvited guest to Nawaz Sharif's granddaughter's marriage.
My God. He was actually invited. He was actually invited. I don't think there's even a comparison here. All right. Veena Sikri wants to respond to you. All right. The debate has already gotten quite heated. Let Veena Sikri respond to you, because you've made a number of points.
I want to say one thing. I already spoke about weaponizing of trade and tariffs. But this question that you are now raising, that you're going to use tariffs on India's purchases of energy from Russia to weaponize to try to influence India's foreign policy. Where has this ever happened before? That you're using tariffs to say, because you are doing this with BRICS, because you are doing this with Russia, you have to pay this tariff. This is unheard heard of. It's never happened before. You cannot try and influence India's foreign policy through these kind of methodologies. And I can tell you that any attempt to do so has already invited a very angry response from all across India's political spectrum, from all across India's economic spectrum, and from the people of India at large. I would request that an explanation should be, this kind of explanation should be given, that don't use tariffs to actually try and influence the foreign policy of a country like India. We believe in our multi-alignment. We believe in our strategic autonomy. We are authorized to do so. This is our independent foreign policy.
Okay.
Please.
Now, I think...
very quickly. Yeah.
So far, India has been very cooperative in its negotiations with the United States. If India starts playing hardball, let me just point out that Facebook's largest market in the world, even larger than the United States, is India. For Google, the second largest market in the world is India. Google has a market share of 97.2% in India for search. Amazon's fifth largest market is India. So if you talk about hardball, India has the option of playing hardball. Remember that China has banned all three of them. Facebook, Google, and Amazon have no presence in China because they're banned there. Yet, China buys more oil from Russia than India does, and it has done so in each of the last 3 years and each of the last 10 years.
Okay.
And yet, it is India that is being singled out for special additional tariff of 25%, while China is only subject to a 30% tariff. So there is something horribly wrong with this arrangement, and I think, it seems to me, that Trump is playing hardball with India because India is not a vassal state. It is not like, say, Germany, Italy, Japan, or South Korea, which have 30 to 50,000 American troops on their soil. It is not like the United Kingdom, which has security dependence on the U.S., or Canada, which is completely dependent on the U.S. India is independent, and somehow that is the bee in...
So you're talking about, I think P.K. Basu, you hit upon a very important point that's become a talking point. We have members of parliament like Shashi Tharoor talking about the entire point of reciprocating these tariffs. You're talking about hitting back in other ways. I'm going to just request Ina Tangent, Matt Klink, as well as a couple of other experts, Fred Ware and Lisa Curtis, to just hold on for a minute. I'm just going to come back to you, but I want to very quickly look at this entire graphic. These are some of the suggestions in terms of options before India. Is it time for retaliatory tariffs? Shashi Tharoor, Member of Parliament of the Congress, says we should raise our tariffs to 15%. Why should it just be 17% is what he says. We have Chambers of Trade and Industry coming out to say that there should be swift action, including reciprocal tariffs. These are also Dipender Goyal, Zomato founder, has come out to say must take destiny in our own hands, whatever that means. But certainly, of course, a loaded statement there. Amitabh Kant, India's ex-G20 Sherpa, says the crisis must be fully utilized. We've also seen Anand Mahindra come out to say that we can't today's Manthan yield Amrit for us? That's a question that he's posing as well. Let me take this entire... All right, what are the other options before India? We do know that India has further negotiations for a robust trade deal. That is, of course, the most obvious course of action. Will it happen? We don't know. There is a US team expected to visit India this month. Trump's statement indicates that might not happen. No official word there yet. They can also cut Russian oil imports if tariffs make it impractical. That's the second option here. India already sources oil from Iraq, KSA, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, UAE as well. Now, of course, the third option before us is they band together with fellow developing countries to resist all of this. They engage with tariff victims BRICS as well as the African Union. Is that a realistic possibility, and will that actually happen, is a question that many are asking. Let me take this question across to Lisa Curtis. Lisa Curtis, what's the real possibility? And Trump has referred to his, resistance to the BRICS currency, these countries coming together. But the very fact and the pattern in his tariffs show you what really he's concerned about. But the inconsistencies and the kind of public posturing that Trump has done, is it possible that he could bring these countries together? And it appears to be happening today. We've seen Prime Minister Modi speak to President Putin. We've seen him speak to President Lula. We know that he's going to be going to China for the SCO summit. Is that actually happening before us?
So I think it's absolutely possible for the U.S. and India to still come to a trade agreement. The U.S. trade team is visiting New Delhi at the end of the month, as you said, and there is a way out for India. India can reduce its oil imports from Russia. India barely imported any energy from Russia at all before the invasion of Ukraine. So India has simply been benefiting from the discounted oil prices. So I think it's entirely possible for India to start reducing its dependence on Russia, shift its to other suppliers. There may be, some short-term economic impact, but there's not going to be anything major. And this would really help to preserve U.S.-India relations, to allow both sides to get a good trade deal.
Lisa Curtis, if I may just comment on that. Sorry I'm interrupting you, but you have your own ambassador, Eric Garcetti, who's on record last year to say that we asked India to buy that oil, otherwise it would set up the global prices at the beginning of the war. And now you have the US, which is actually saying, no, we're going to punish you for buying the same oil which we asked you to buy 3 years ago. How does that work?
Well, it's because we have a new president in the United States, and he's taking a different tack.
That's
Russia.
not India's fault, is it?
And, India benefited by the Biden administration turning a blind eye to importing Russian oil. But President Trump is making very clear that that is not acceptable to his administration. And like I said, India had not relied on Russian energy imports before Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
So what about the EU?
I think it's interesting
for India to do. And I think it's going to be a lot more beneficial for India to try to come to an agreement with the United States than if it thinks it's going to cooperate with
Well, you would also agree, ma'am, the hypocrisy of EU buying the same energy?
Cooperation between Russia, India, and China, which makes no sense at all. India had a border crisis with China just 5 years ago. You can't tell me that India is going to benefit by turning to China.
Yeah, but at the moment, they're not tariffing us 50%, are they? PK Basu.
I think the important thing is India wants to be friendly to the United States. But it cannot, it takes two to tango. And as far as the U.S. is concerned, if India stops buying, if there is a genuine ban on all Russian oil exports, that'll cause a massive spike in oil prices. And that's not just going to affect the whole world, it's going to particularly affect the United States, because the only reason why inflation has continued to surprise on the low side in the U.S. is because oil prices have come down. And oil prices have come down ever since November 6th last year, when Trump announced that he's going to basically remove all the restraints on oil and gas production in the U.S., and he worked out a deal with OPEC Plus, which includes Russia, by the way, to increase their production. So if India suddenly stops buying Russian oil, and there is a genuine ban on everybody buying Russian oil, then oil prices will spike.
Absolutely.
Now, the point is, there's a very small benefit to India from buying Russian oil relative to others. It's a relatively small benefit, but there is a big benefit to the world, including to the U.S. consumers of oil who love to drive and who will be hugely affected if the gasoline price begins to go up.
All right, Lisa Curtis, respond to that. And also, ma'am, you haven't answered the larger question on the EU hypocrisy, which even Veena Sikri pointed out to, that there's EU that's actually importing a huger amount of energy, including natural gas, including crude oil, from Russia. What about them? Shouldn't they be taxed then at 50% as well? Why 15% for them?
Well, the EU is clearly standing up to Russian aggression, supporting Ukraine, investing more in their own defense so that they can, protect themselves from Russian imperialism and continuing to support Ukraine. So I don't think there's any question about EU policy when it comes to Russia. And again, the EU was highly dependent on Russian energy before the Russians decided to unjustifiably invade Ukraine.
But ma'am, the logic still holds.
Yeah, we did not depend on Russian energy before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So I've already dealt with that, and I would just conclude my remarks, because I do have to leave. That again, there is a way out. There's a way forward for the U.S. and India, And, hopefully the two sides will take the long-term view of the relationship and the partnership, because India and the United States do have strategic convergences.
Of course they do. Of course they do. And that's why you're not seeing India make the kind of public, statements that Trump has made, which many would consider insulting here in India and completely undiplomatic, unbecoming of a head of state. But Major General Dhruv Katoch would like to respond to what Lisa Curtis is saying. Is this logic making any sense to you? That EU was already dependent on Russia, so just because they are buying it post the war, that's not funding of the Russian war machine, but India buying it after the war is funding of the Russian war machine.
Thank you, Madhav. Madhav, I think what I've heard is pure hypocrisy all along, It doesn't work that way. The question is really not about who is funding the Ukraine war. The point is, why did that war start? And it started because of Ukraine and the European Union. They deliberately waged a war. They instigated it so that Ukraine will fight Russia and bring Russia down. No, that hasn't happened. And it's their fault. And they've been fighting for 3 years. And now you want to seek some justification, and you're trying to say, okay, because India is buying oil. I think, it's got nothing to do with that. The Ukrainians are being killed not because of Indians. Ukrainians are being killed because two white Christian tribes are fighting in one corner of the world, and they are being supported by other white Christian tribes. That is the truth of it. And the day those white Christian tribes stop supporting the other white Christian tribes in Ukraine, the war will stop. It can stop tomorrow if they so want it. So I don't think they should pass it on to us. I think just one more sentence I'd like to say. I think what President Trump is trying to play, and I think that is where, in my view, he's going wrong. He's playing a tactical game now at the expense of a larger strategic game. Ultimately, we will realize that our strategic convergence, as Lisa so very correctly puts it, we have got total convergence of the United States and India in the Indo-Pacific.
Right.
And there, a larger threat is there. Now, I don't think President Trump should actually threaten that for a small tactical success which he may get here.
Right.
Which, as it is under the present Indian dispensation, he's not going to get. So I personally feel in this particular case, they're going hopelessly wrong. But the only last thing I would like to say, I think the Indian government has handled it well. We have not started screaming or gone overboard. I think they're just playing it cool, and I think that's the way it should be played.
All right, let me bring in Ina Tangent, senior fellow. He's not yet spoken yet. Ina Tangent is a senior fellow of the Tahe Institute and chairman of Asia Narratives. Ina Tangent, what do you make of the American argument coming in that India and US have a lot of strategic convergences, and that this sort of closening of ties with whether it's China, whether it's Russia, whether it's Brazil, is not something that's sustainable for the long term? Your response to that view that was expressed by Lisa Curtis a short while earlier.
Well, I mean, if I'm an American, and I can tell you that I kind of reject this idea that Washington should be running other countries. I do believe that India is a sovereign nation, has 1.4 billion people. It's one of the rising economies in the world. And the U.S. is literally, and Lisa was saying, oh, you should just give in. You have an opportunity to knuckle under, to abase yourself, to do exactly as we tell you to do. Sounds a lot like colonialism to me. But I want to point out something that you alluded to earlier, and that is there's 50% against Brazil, 30% South Africa, more coming for Russia, or supposedly. And what does China get? A 90-day reprieve. So it goes to show that if the U.S. is dealing with somebody they think is stronger, they tiptoe around it. They say they're going to do stuff, but they don't actually do it. But if they sense any weakness, all right, they go in for the kill. And why do I say that? It was India and Brazil at the last BRICS meeting who said, look, we don't need to antagonize the United States. We don't need to mention them directly in terms of these tariffs. What we need to do is just keep a balance. Well, for Donald Trump, that sounds like weakness.
Right.
It isn't. I think it's strength. But the fact is, he's taking his weakness, and immediately he slaps 50% on both of them, the ones who are trying to help the United States.
Exactly. Right.
But, I mean, he fears BRICS. He's made that clear. I'd love to play poker with Donald Trump because he always has a tell. If he's worried about you, he says, I'm going to hit you with 100%. I'm going to 10%, a million percent, whatever.
Lose.
So this is exactly how he plays his game.
Right.
But then when it actually comes to it, what does he have?
Right.
He is negotiating with other countries to determine how much American consumers are going to pay the U.S. government in tariffs.
Right.
Can you imagine that?
Absolutely.
It sounds ridiculous, but that's what he's doing. A couple of things that people should consider. First off, Donald Trump is facing 5 lawsuits. I'm a lawyer. I looked at these suits against his tariffs. He's going
Absolutely.
to lose
I'm going to come to that point. Inattention, sorry I'm interrupting you. I'm going to come to that point. That is a separate debating point. But I want to bring in Matt Link on that point. Matt Link, it's all very well to laugh, but the point is this. Countries that have actually tried to accommodate, and India was one of the first of the batch saying that, all right, Harley-Davidson motorcycles or bourbon whiskey, we're going to cut a certain amount of tariffs. And this whole narrative that has been built about India being a tariff king is actually untrue. The fact is that with reforms, we've been lowering our tariff levels over a certain period of time, but these things take time. Automotive sector, yes, we may have one of the highest tariffs, but other sectors have slowly but gradually been opening up, and it's been a slow process that's been underway. So this is completely untrue to come out and say that India is the country that has the maximum tariffs in the world. It's factually not true.
And also, we must point to the successful.
So bourbon and Harley-Davidson motorcycles equals allowing you to buy what 1.75 billion or million barrels of oil per day for Russia at a reduced price, refine it and sell it as a high price. Now that's the hypocrisy.
Well, we started off as a trade deal. It was the imbalance of trade that President Trump started off with. The oil has just come into the narrative last fortnight, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, well, you laugh.
Well,
let me just point out that Donald Trump himself, Trump himself said that the war was started by Ukraine.
Okay, let Matt come in.
When
let
he was
Matt come
running
in.
for president,
I've asked him a question. Let him respond to that, and then you can come in. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a tough negotiating tactic by Donald Trump, and you can say what you want. You don't have to agree to it. You can play hardball. I would tell you, though, of all those 3 options, good luck organizing with Brazil and China against the United States. See how far that gets you.
Okay.
So Lisa highlighted it. You can do it. Your future lies more with the United States than against the United States. And if you want to poke Trump in the eye, he's going to poke back even harder.
Well, he's already poked us in the eye, is what many would believe. Let me bring in Fred Wade. Just a second. Fred Wade hasn't spoken yet. Fred Wade is a Russian expert and journalist. Fred Wade, what's your response to this argument coming in from Matt Link that good luck dealing with China and Russia? Is it really that simple an argument?
Well, first of all, I don't think that Trump's frustration with Putin is the motivating factor for any of this. It's a pretext. In fact, the Russia-U.S. process is on its own track. They've just announced a summit meeting that will be taking place next week between Trump and Putin. Everything looks to be coming up roses right now. And this is deadline day, there are no new tariffs on Russia. So I don't think that whatever Trump's strategy is, and it's awfully unpredictable and it doesn't look coherent to most of us, it isn't about one thing, one little thing, or supporting Ukraine or anything like that. Maybe it's about reshaping world trading patterns, using American weight, throwing it around. That's clearly what he's doing, but he's doing it in such an unpredictable way that nobody can make sense of it. And everybody, as we see right here, everybody's floundering around. But as for Russia, they seem to have been handling Trump pretty well all these months, riding with his moods up and down, waiting him out. And now Putin is getting what he wanted, which is a summit meeting with Trump next week. And the Kremlin spokesman said yesterday that Steve Witkoff, Trump's emissary, brought an acceptable proposal about peace in Ukraine to that meeting with Putin yesterday. So, blame Russia all you like, but Trump is playing his own game, and it isn't. It's whatever he's doing with India probably won't affect in one way or another his relationship.
Sikri, one thing that comes out of all this, and this is very important, what Fred just said. He said that Russia has been literally waiting and wearing out the United States. We see that frustration in President Trump. That's been quite obvious. Have we been a bit too eager to sort of try and arrive at a deal too early? And is that something that has adversely impacted our interest in a sense? Is a question that arises when you just compare what's happened vis-a-vis Russia and what's happened vis-a-vis India.
Well, let me say, first of all, I'd like to make this very strong assertion here that India attaches the highest importance to its relations with USA. India has done so always and continues to do so. There is an across-the-board agreement in India on that, and that is part of the reason that India's response to all this, these raising of the tariffs has been very calm and collected and cautious. Prime Minister had an important cabinet meeting today, but nothing will come out in the open that, we're going to take a strident view and so on. Secondly, I'd like to say very clearly that India is not joining hands with China or Russia or BRICS or anyone else against the USA. It's attaching the highest importance to the talks with President Putin, and after Mr. Steve Witkoff's discussions yesterday in the Kremlin, there seems to be some hope on that. But I do think also that President Trump is actually attaching even higher importance to the trade deal he wants with China. And I think this is one of the main reasons why he's throwing everybody under the bus in the face of getting a good trade deal with China. You know, he's telling China, look, I'm taking the Pakistan card away from you. He's inviting Asim Munir for lunch. He's telling China, I'm taking the Bangladesh card away from you. He's, doing a non-disclosure agreement with Bangladesh on stopping their purchases of defense equipment from China and Russia. And he's trying to tell China, look, I can treat India like this. We don't really have he's minimizing the importance of the strategic partnership in the interest of getting a better deal with China. While that's all very good in its own way, India has responded very cautiously, very calmly. We are not going to be strident on this. We are going to try to continue the talks. And we did the talks, Madhav, because in February, when our Prime Minister was there was an agreement between the two leaders on having these talks and doing their best to conclude a bilateral trade agreement by September. Yes. So in the interest of that, we have gone ahead full steam, made a lot of concessions and said that yes, we want to and we have gone ahead full steam, made a lot of concessions and said that yes, we want to and we know that in July we were very close to a bilateral trade agreement. It was taken by the USTR to President Trump and he turned it down. So I think that is when all this built up.
Absolutely. And I want to come to the crux of really where things are stuck at the moment. And Anand Ahuja, it's wrong to say that India has not tried to, give US, some amount of leeway, some amount of cushion room. India tried earnestly at the start of the year, just ahead of Prime Minister Modi's visit to the United States, where he met with President Trump. But the point is this, that if US insists on what India cannot deliver, which is a no-go area in the form of agriculture and dairy products, just as President Trump is looking out for the interest of his farmers there in the United States, India has to protect its farmers here, who are almost 50% of our population. Anand Ahuja.
Madhav, first of all, I'm a very optimistic person, and I personally believe that sooner or later we are going to have this trade deal. Now, coming back to why USA has not imposed that kind of tariff on China, you have to understand that United States imports rare minerals from China. So USA is more or less dependent upon China's rare minerals. Whereas what India exports to USA, any other country can export to. India is exporting jewelry. India is exporting garments, textiles. Those market has already been shifted to other countries. In fact, I read an article, and I will suggest you, if you can get hold of that article, it says Trump's tariff causes panic in India and relief in Asian countries. All Asian countries, they are looking to share that pie now. So the more this trade deal is delayed, I personally believe it's going to have irreversible harm for both the countries. So it's in the interest of both the countries to sit and decide and sort out all these differences, because we don't have to look into just in the area of trade. We have to look into our political strategic relationship also.
Right. You agree with that, General Dhruv Katoch, that the more it's delayed, it will impact both the countries?
No, that is true. You delay it, it will impact. But, I don't agree with this point that we have to agree to what the US says. The US cannot blackmail India. That's the center point. We are going to follow an independent foreign policy. We will deal with whomsoever we choose to. And nobody going to tell us not to do, we're not a colonial, we're not being subjugated anymore.
Right.
We're a free, independent country under a very strong leadership. So, I think this sort of sermonizing doesn't get us anywhere.
Right.
I think if you want to go ahead, please understand we have got very great strategic convergences built on that. And that is on the Indo-Pacific.
Right.
And if you want to destroy that, it'll ultimately hurt the Americans more than anybody else.
Right. Let me quickly go across to the next set of points. Just coming to Mr. Basu, the next set of talking points that we're looking at, that we were discussing a short while earlier, if you can bring up all the graphics, this is what India is looking at in terms of trade agreements with UK. There's a free trade agreement that's just been signed a few weeks ago. The tariffs on 99% of exports have been eliminated. Imports and exports are likely to increase drastically. With the Philippines, 14 agreements, MOUs that have been signed. Both sides agree to increase trade, and that happened just a few days ago. With EU, there is expected to be a trade deal that would likely be implemented from October. So by the end of this year, hopefully, that is one big market where India should have a trade deal sorted. We've seen EU visit India as well and push for an early resolution to the outstanding issues there as well. Now, what really are we looking at in terms of India's strategy? India is not going to succumb to such theatrics, is what we've been told. This is what government sources have been indicating. They haven't made any public statement, but this is what sources say. They say that the visit of the negotiation team at this point of time, at least, is not on hold, despite the fact that President Trump may have indicated so. Pressure tactic ahead of negotiations is how India is looking at it. They also say that they are preparing a list of items that can be offered as far as free trade is concerned, looking at other countries as well in terms of where it could, in fact, not impact on the Indian economy. Holding consultations with stakeholders is what the government is saying at this point of time. But how is Trump's tariff impacting upon Americans? A point that one of our panelists was making a short while earlier. This is the average additional cost to U.S. households, $2,400 US. We're looking at the impact on low-income households at $1,300 as well. And this is what Americans will have to pay. No surprise then that you're seeing retailing websites such as Amazon add an extra layer in all the costs as to what the tariffs entail in terms of what they're purchasing. $5,000 is the impact on high-income households is what we believe, and this is what several have estimated. There's also, of course, various legal aspects of what we've been discussing a short while earlier. And Ina Tangent, I want you to come in on this because you were talking about not just the issue of the People's Court and what people of the United States would have to pay, but also as far as the legal troubles in courts that Trump's tariffs are already facing. Ina Tangent.
Okay, remember there's another issue here, and that's Epstein, the Epstein files. Donald Trump is mired. He cannot get away from it, and he's looking for diversions. The fact is he's going to lose at least one of these cases, in which case his whole tariff program kind of disappears. This sets up this victim narrative that he loves, that somehow he was prevented from finding solutions. So a lot of this, you have to carefully consider whether this is all a mirage, something that has been concocted by Trump, who's very cunning when it comes to public relations, to simply divert attention from the Epstein issue. In terms of, what India...
What a joke.
Excuse me?
We'll come to you.
At the end of the day, what India should consider, and I'm saying doing it, but is getting together with
coming to you, Mr. Ahuja, Mr. Klink will come to you one by one.
I didn't interrupt you, so please stop interrupting me.
Yeah, go on, Mr. Tangent.
The thing that India can consider is that it is not just an attack on India, it's an attack on the BRICS. Why? Because the BRICS are 40% of the world's GDP, majority of people. A much larger percentage of the manufacturing, the markets, resources. If these countries came together, not politically, but just went to Trump and said, knock it off. All right? If you do this, we will have countermeasures. And if you think that you're bigger than us collectively, you're done.
Okay.
Trump is a playground bully.
Okay.
He goes around threatening people to try
respond
to
to this. Respond to this. Important point Mr. Tangent makes. It's just bullying tactics from President Trump. He's a playground bully is what he says. And if all of these countries stood up to him, there would be, in fact, he would have no other option but to give in. He's just trying to divert from the Epstein files. Respond to that, Mr. Ahuja.
Yes, so we have to understand that this particular issue was one of the Trump's election promises. He made that promise to the voters in the United States. And this was one of the reasons that voters in the United States elected Donald Trump as president of the country. And during election time, Epstein file was not an issue. Epstein file issue came only recently. So it makes me laugh when somebody says that it's just a diversion from the Epstein file.
No, but it is an issue now. How can you deny that it's an issue now?
No, it's an issue now, but it's not a diversion. It's not a diversion. Trade tariff is not a diversion from Epstein file. Secondly, you have to understand the persistent trade deficit. United States has more than $1 trillion trade deficit for the last so many years. That allows President Trump, under International Emergency Economic Powers Act, to impose tariff on other countries without Congress permission. So we have to understand the circumstances and which law.
But his very powers are being challenged in the court. The courts are exactly looking at that, whether he has the powers to do that or not.
United States is a land of litigations. People fight here without any reason.
Okay, Matt Link is holding his head. I'm going to let Ina Tangent just quickly respond to you on that before I come back to Matt Link. Ina Tangent.
Yeah, I mean, you're not a lawyer. You obviously don't know what you're talking about. The appeals court has already heard the case, and they asked very, very difficult questions on it. It will ultimately be decided.
He's actually a lawyer, sir. He's an attorney at law. Yeah. Carry on, Mr.
He's a very poor one at that. If you're saying that it gives the right, there's no right, and you cannot cite where that right is there. That particular clause, we could argue in law, but that would bore people. The fact is that Donald Trump is already setting this up for a victim. He said a left-wing bunch of radical, lefties are going to sabotage this. This is the only way that he can be diverted. Well, who's going to decide this? This is the United States Supreme Court. 9 justices, 6 of them who are conservative, 3 of them who are appointed by Donald Trump. So if he's calling them a left-wing radical organization, he's really turning against people, as he did against his own MAGA people, who he called weak, stupid, all right, for believing in the Epstein files cases.
Okay. Matt Link, would you like to respond to that?
What poor soul. Peak Trump derangement syndrome. This is a typical Democratic response, which is why they hold zero power in the United States right now. They could keep all of the things that their guest before just trotted out. By the way, there's no need to be insulting about you. Bravo to you that you have a law degree, sir. We're so proud of you. But look, peak Trump derangement syndrome. The bottom line is that Democrats hold none of the cards here, and they're so distraught because they have no power. And the American people don't want to vote Democratic. Look, ultimately, heading back to these tariffs, India is a proud country. I have no doubt that you will stand up for your own economic best interests, as will Donald Trump stand up for American best interests, unlike that weakling Joe Biden that preceded him, and let the negotiations proceed apace. That's all that, I mean, this is not a bad thing. This is a good thing.
Okay. Is it really a good thing?
Yeah. Madhav, just one second.
Yeah.
I am licensed in more jurisdictions. I bet on that this gentleman is. You want to have a bet? I am licensed in more jurisdictions in the United States.
Okay, let's not reduce this. Let's not reduce this to a personal battle.
Don't challenge me. Don't challenge me, okay? Don't challenge me. Just because you have a white skin.
I said you're an attorney at law.
Don't challenge me.
Mr. Ahuja, let's not.
Brown skin people are more intelligent.
We're talking about India-US. Sir, we are discussing India-US ties on a lighter note. We're not discussing Ina Tangent, Anand Ahuja ties. So let's let this thing just rest for the moment. I think there are bigger issues at hand. PK Basu wants to respond to Matt. Yeah.
Okay. First thing, I think it's important to understand that Trump himself, last year, during the U.S. presidential campaign, talked about Ukraine as having been the reason the war began. So until about 3 months ago, remember he berated Zelensky in the White House, Oval Office, in public, along with J.D. Vance. So Trump's own position on the Russia-Ukraine war has flipped in the last month or month and a half.
Several times.
Yeah, and so India is being caught in the crosshairs of that. Now, that's one aspect. Second is, I actually personally think that India is very competitive in agricultural exports. We are a massive net exporter of agricultural products. We're the largest exporter of rice in the world. If we choose to export wheat, we'll be the largest wheat exporter in the world.
Yeah.
We are a significant meat exporter. So we have a lot of success. And if you look at dairy, our cost of dairy production is way lower than the world, and we produce high quality dairy
there are a lot of complicated issues there.
So I frankly think that India should have allowed agriculture and dairy to be included.
There are other sensitivities. There are other sensitivities, including non-vegetarian items fed to the cows and so on and so forth. And what will really happen if there is a lot of cheap, products which will actually destroy our rural sector, where a huge percentage of our population stays. But the last question I want to put across to Fred, we're almost out of time, ladies and gentlemen. Fred, where the last question is this. The question is, there's so much riding for China, for Russia, for India, for Brazil, and the big question appears to be, the spotlight appears to be on Russia, and whether all of this pressure ultimately will result in Russia taking a step back as far as the Ukraine war is concerned, because that could set a lot of these issues at rest from what we understand. Fred?
It would be great if this war could be ended. The Russians have been fighting for, they're well into the fourth year of what is a very big war, and they have certain war goals. I'm not advocating this, but they have made their goals, their objectives very clear, and they have not compromised on them. They're very clearly not going to. This is what got Trump all angry the last time he had a conversation with Putin, because Putin told him, I guess, something like that. But Trump sent his emissary over here yesterday. They sat down. Apparently, there is some sort of a roadmap, or at least an outline of a peace settlement, which we'll find out about next week. But I bet you it won't include any major Russian concessions on anything but territory, which isn't the main priority.
All right. There's a completely out of time. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but we have to wrap up here. It's a hard stop, I've been told by my producers. Veena Sikri, Major Dhruv Katoch, PK Basu, Matt Klink, Anand Ahuja, Ina Tangent, Fred Weir, as well as Lisa Curtis was with us earlier. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the National Debate.